So last month, I offered a sermon on regret, and I had said that I was going to talk about the Robert Frost poem, and as way leads on to way, I did not get to the Robert Frost poem, but I thought I would do that. I thought I would do that today because I think that it actually has a message that is apropos of the new year and making decisions about how we move forward. So that poem is one of the most famous and one of the most beloved. And one of the things that they teach you to do when you're preaching or delivering a speech is that what they say is that you should really pack in the most meaning at the end, because that's going to be the sort of crystalline point that people are going to take away from what it is that you're saying. I think that happened with the Robert Frost poem, but I also think that it doesn't exactly serve the poem, because I think it's led to an interpretation that I think many have of that poem that may speak against what's kind of in the rest of the poem. I'll put it that way. Now, because it's a beloved poem, this might be one of your beloved poems, and you might have a particular reading of it, a particular meaning that's attached to it. And I don't think there's one right way to read a poem. And so I'm not getting up here to do that thing that people do that I find so annoying. Well, actually, the poem is about, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the difference of interpretation here, because I think that one interpretation has some spiritual wisdom in it, and it's an interpretation of the poem that I don't think is always lifted. So the crystalline meaning that people take away is that last line, "I shall be telling this with a sigh, sometime ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I chose the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." Now, I think what some people have taken from that is that the poem is this celebration of what I would call heroic nonconformism. I am so great. I was able to find out and choose that path that no one else has trod. And I, was this pioneer who went forth and kind of, carved out my own way. And I don't want to be completely dismissive of that, because I do think that there's some wisdom in that. And there's some wisdom particularly for us Unitarian Universalists. Many of us came from another faith tradition, and some of us found the conformity that was enforced in that faith tradition to be particularly problematic. And so arriving in Unitarian Universalism, where we celebrate a diversity of beliefs and a diversity of spiritual paths, and we really commit to be with each other on different as we're practicing different spiritual practices, and as we're engaging in theological reflection that's leading us to very different conclusions, that can be a way in which we have taken a road less traveled, right? And I think that's worthy of being lifted up. What's curious about the poem, though, is that earlier in the poem, it seems to say something quite different. And I'm going to read that part. So, this person is on this path and the roads diverge, and he's trying to decide which one to go on. And so he says, he was looking out on it, and he said there was one that was, grassy and wanted wear, and it had the better claim on him. It was the road less traveled. But then immediately in the next line, he says, though as for the passing there, really it had been worn just about the same. And both that morning lay in leaves no step had trodden black. In other words, Neither of the paths in front of him had been well worn. It wasn't like, oh, this is the path everybody takes, and this is the path that no one has taken. Instead, he's looking out and he's like, I don't really have a reason to think one is more well traversed than the other. Instead, I'm standing here at the fork between these two roads, and I'm forced with it to make a decision. I just have to make a choice. Now, how does that relate to the end of the poem? Well, the end of the poem is kind of, and Robert Frost actually said this. He said it's supposed to be a bit humorous. It's supposed to be humorous. He's saying that in the far distant future, he's gonna look back on that road diverging, and he's gonna sigh and say, oh, I made this heroic choice to take the road less traveled by, when in reality, it was just a choice. He had to make a choice. He had to choose which one to move forward with. One wasn't more heroic than the other. He just had to choose. He had to choose. Now, I bring that up because I'm thinking today about how there can be some freedom in that. When we start to think that the decisions that we make about our lives, the choices that we make about our lives are so precious that they have to live up to this high ideal, whether that's heroic nonconformism or some other high ideal that we have set down for ourselves, and we say, I want, my life has to live up to this standard. And if it doesn't live up to this standard, if this choice doesn't live up to this standard, then I'm not even going to try it. I'm not even going to do it. I'm not even going to take a risk and see what this path may bring me. That is a way in which our lives can start to close down options. In fact, our lives might start to have their options so closed down that we start to feel paralyzed to risk making a choice, to have the courage to make a particular choice. Now, I think that there are many different parts of our lives in which simply choosing to act, saying, you know what, I don't know. Like, I don't have, this sense that this path for sure is going to lead me in this direction and to this grand result, but I'm going to give it a try. I think that there can be something really worthy in thinking about that. And I'm thinking about two parts of our lives today, and I think that this is especially appropriate as we're turning over into the new year. One of those parts is social justice and social action. One of those parts are the ways that we think we might impact the wider world. How many times have I heard somebody say, you know what, it's just not worth it. It's all so overwhelming. Whatever little thing that I might choose to do here, it's just not going to make a difference. So you know what, I'm not even going to try. It's all just too much. It's all just too much. Well, you don't really know whether it's going to make a difference or whether you are going to find some meaning in it, unless you take the risk to jump in and try it, to try that path. That path is not, you have the path of going home and watching your favorite show, or you have the path of trying this thing, and you don't know what the result is going to be for, trying this new thing. But maybe taking a risk, you might find something valuable. You might find something that is an anchor for you and something that creates a difference in a way that you had not expected, right? And then the other area of our lives that I'm thinking about today is spiritual practice. And some of us, we make all different kinds of New Year's resolutions. Some of us don't make New Year's resolutions. I've never been too hot on New Year's resolutions because I feel like the discourse about New Year's resolutions is more about how we break them than about how we succeeded in them. So I'm not sure how helpful that is to our spiritual well-being. But nonetheless, some of us might be contemplating trying a new spiritual practice. And that also can be an area in which we feel that I don't know what, somebody will say like, well, I'm not good at meditation, or I've never had success with, this particular, thing before, or they might feel like because there's not going to be this immediate step to being an expert at it, that it's not even worth trying. Like, this is something I don't even want to risk trying. But that is, again, that's another road that we might choose to take, in which we might discover some unexpected, unanticipated meaning when we take the risk to try it. And I know many people here in our congregation have learned about and tried new practices, often from each other. There's a loving kindness meditation group. There's other meditative practices. I practice yoga. I didn't know that yoga was going to be something that I loved and found a tremendous amount of meaning in. Instead, about 12 years ago, I just took the risk to show up to a class and see what that would be like for me. And it opened a path for me that has led to some greater and greater depth in terms of my physical well-being, my mental well-being, my spiritual well-being, my understanding of the world and philosophy. There were all kinds of layers that I could never have anticipated if I hadn't taken the risk to try it. But I had no idea that any of that existed before I took the step on that path. And so as we are turning to a new year, what I want to encourage is that you might not have clarity about where that path is going to lead. And you know what? You might start it and realize it was a dead end, and you have to turn back and go back on the other path. That's okay too, because we have to do that in order to learn and grow and live our lives. But if we choose not to take a risk, then we might be missing out on something crucial. And so I want to return us today, in order to bring our sermon to an end today, to the first words that Carla brought, which were the words from Rumi. They were a part of a poem, and I'm going to read the whole poem here. I think it's a good bookend. Bless you. It's a good bookend for this sermon. Oh, you spiritual window shoppers. You idly ask, how much is that? Oh, I'm just looking. Those spiritual window shoppers, they handle 100 items and they put them down, shadows with no capital. But what is spent is love and 2 eyes wet with weeping. But these walk into a shop and their whole lives pass suddenly in the moment in that shop. Where did you go? Nowhere. What did you have to eat? Nothing much. Even if you don't know what you want, buy something. Be part of the exchanging flow. Start a huge, foolish project like Noah. It makes absolutely no difference what people will think of you. And it makes absolutely no difference where this path will lead. What is important is that you take that first step.